Now when I started this channel we had nothing more than a comment on a video and a 25p graphics card. There was no camera, no script, and well, the video frankly wasn't very good, but this was a starting point. And well, then came the camera, my old phone, the Cubot S550. And well, the focus is fairly bad, the noise is awful, but it was a start. And hey, at least you guys could see exactly what I was looking at. And still, this went on for a while, benchmarking, filming, covering it in a video, but what was I benchmarking on? Well, that's sort of what this video is about. The PC that started it all, the beginning of the channel, the CPU that made this channel, and frankly the CPU that no one really wants to edit on, but I still managed to do it just fine. This is that story. Now where to start? Well, this PC was never made for editing. Gaming sure, but editing on 2 cores, not to give too much away, was always a pain in the arse. From very long render times to generally just working on the video clips. As when the channel's popularity went up, so did the quality, as I tried to put the quality up in every video. I mean, you might not have noticed, but if you compare 7 months ago to now, considering I knew nothing about editing, I'm sure you'll agree that I did try. I mean, I upgraded phones to a Nexus 6 and began to film in 4K, which allowed for some nice close-up shots without the loss of detail, but this only made matters worse. But was I annoyed at my PC? Well, no, it worked fine and it kept on going to make these videos, so it's a sad day to see it go, but it's time to take this thing apart and get it ready to sell. Now an empty husk of itself, this PC and the camera we're using is what started the channel, so let's take a look about what was actually in my PC. The Core i3-6100 was at the heart of it with its 2 cores and 4 threads clocked in at 3.7 GHz, and for what it is, it wasn't half bad. This to go with my R9 285 and 8 gigs of DDR4 2400 MHz RAM was pretty amazing at everything I needed it to do. I had a 128 gig SSD for booting, a 1TB hard disk drive for games, and a 320GB hard drive completely filled with footage, not to mention the fact that the 1TB drive had also pretty much been filled with footage at this point. But this system was pretty amazing for everything I needed it to do. I mean, gaming wise it was perfect, and editing wise it held up fairly well. I mean, every video you've seen on the channel has pretty much been made on this system. But it's time to upgrade, as video renders would take hours. The multiple layers of footage would always bring it down to a crawl, but hey, this is a turning point for things. Now my first PC was an AMD PC with an FX 4300, and I still have it, admittedly in someone else's PC. And I loved it. I mean, sure, it wasn't the best when it came to playing games, but I could stick everything on high at the time, and I could enjoy what I was playing, with it not only running great, but looking pretty great too. And that CPU lasted me ages before I got the legendary i3 that was an even better CPU for the money at the time I bought it. If you were only gaming, that is. But productivity wise, we all know what's best, and nothing is going to beat Ryzen for the money at the moment. So thanks to a very kind donation on stream and a good few weeks hard work, I ordered some of the best value and most expensive parts, which sounds like an oxymoron, but really it's actually what it was, and they were great parts for the money I paid: a Ryzen 5 1600, an Asus Strix B350 motherboard, and a Corsair case. Very similar to the parts I really chose for my first proper PC build, except now about 5 times faster. As most of you know, the Ryzen 5 1600 is one of the best budget CPUs right now, and it cost me less than an i7, and well, when it comes down to 6 unlocked cores versus 4 locked cores in benchmarks and real world usage, well, I like to think I made the right choice, but you'll have to see and wait till later on to find out more about that. The motherboard I chose was an Asus board, because I've really never even had an Asus one break. My H110 one was great, my AM3 one was great, my LGA 775 one is great, my AM2 one is great, but yeah, I'm sure you get the picture. They're reliable and they work well. And hey, here in the UK, my warranty's through Amazon, so I don't actually have to deal with Asus directly if anything does go wrong. I'll be using my old power supply unit and my old 8GB stick of Corsair DDR4 RAM, as well as my AMD Radeon R9 285. One of the best £120 purchases I think I've ever made. But let's get on with putting this all together. And finally, peeling away the last piece of plastic, the PC is complete, but not quite done just yet. I think we need to make a few small modifications to it. Well, firstly, the PC looks amazing, but inside this is why it's interesting. Sure, you can see the R9 285, but what's under that? That smaller orange object? Well, that's the ATI Radeon X300 complete with composite output. Probably the only Ryzen PC which has this, as over on budget builds we wanted the PC to be unique, and if I want to plug in a CRT and use Ryzen, then this is kind of useful for me. And then of course we have the wireless card which connects to the largest antenna I could find on Amazon, as unfortunately I don't have access to an Ethernet port. And we've come a long way with the channel, and I never thought we'd be able to get anything near this good. We've come from a £3 microphone to a professional sounding Blue Yeti. We've started filming on 4K on the Nexus 6 and have recently invested into a DSLR camera for even better quality. All of which means subsidised by the kind donations on stream and from our supporters over on the Patreon who helped make all this possible. It's gone very past these past few months, and it's been very hard work funding the channel, making these videos, but we've made it so far, from the £2 PC that got us over 1,000 views for the first time, to the 25p PC which actually got most of you guys here today. The quality's gotten better and better, and I can't wait to see what improvement this PC and the new equipment will bring. I mean, take a listen and look how the videos sounded when we first had B-roll. Yeah, that's not too great. And now look at the quality on the videos now, the scripts, the editing. It's all been a journey of improvement. So let's move on from this nostalgic look back at the channel and see what this PC can actually do. And to kick things off, we have the Battlefront 2 beta, which ran completely fine with high and ultra settings. Something you guys probably don't hear on this channel, but with a 66 FPS average, it was not only surprisingly smooth, but it was actually just smooth. I mean, by the close proximity of the 1% and 0.1% lows of 50 and 42 FPS respectively, the game was way more than playable. Surprisingly, even with 4K and the low setting selected, we achieved a playable 32 FPS average, which was fine, and although the visual clarity was amazing, the loss of texture and lighting quality as well as the overall unstable experience and lack of a high frame rate would lead me to say that 1080p was better on this system. But still, we're playing 4K games on a graphics card which you can get now for £85. Now that's not bad. And to follow this up, we have GTA 5 with an average of 70 FPS while being ran with the ultra settings in 1080p. It didn't stray too far from this actually too, with 1% lows down to 47 FPS and 0.1% lows down to 43 FPS. Altogether a great experience and not something I'd have an issue with at all, especially with it looking and running this well. And I did also try GTA 5 in 4K, which ran really well with a mixture of medium and high settings, and the game did look great, and was super sharp, the same as Battlefront 2 was. And it ran better than Battlefront 2 well, with a great average of 38 FPS, 1% lows down to 30 FPS, and 0.1% lows down to 28 FPS. So altogether playable in 4K, but really I'd choose 1080p for a card like this. Fallout 4, a game which is notorious for hating AMD cards, ran completely fine with the high preset in 1080p, with an average of 60 FPS, which was completely fine as the game is capped at 60 FPS. So to reiterate, the game is completely fine. The game could drop down during loading times, but as shown by the 1% and 0.1% lows of 41 and 34 FPS, this was only momentary and not jarring at all. As for something a little bit more modern, released in 2017 with support for DirectX 12, we have Forza 7 with the high settings in 1080p, with an average of a silky smooth 60 FPS, although it did go down to a minimum of 7 FPS. And for the most part, besides that one momentary stutter, the game was completely playable, looked fine, looked great even, and the game is so well optimised that with a few tweaks, you could probably get this running at a silky smooth 60 FPS at 4K. And following this up with DirectX 12 based games, we have Halo 5, which ran perfect in the high settings once again, with a smooth 60 FPS average once again, although we did have a minimum FPS of 50 FPS. So the game was smooth, and so far as the two top DirectX 12 games are running completely fine on the system, then I'd be willing to bet that this system is fine for years to come still. Although these two games are capped at 60 FPS though, so maybe you could up the resolution in them or the anti-aliasing or find a way to uncap it, it'd be your choice. As for Hitman, another recent game, it ran flawless as to be expected with an average FPS of 83 and 1% lows down to 65 and 0.1% lows down to 15, which appeared to be one momentary stutter we had across the entire time I had playing, so Hitman in high was also a great experience. As for Bethesda's latest game and the final game we're going to test, we have Prey in high running in 1080p, which was perfect. And the game looked great, as I personally really do love the style this game has, especially when it's as fluent as this with a smooth 78 FPS average, 1% lows down to 59 FPS, and 0.1% lows down to 27 FPS, so once again no issues here. And in some synthetic benchmarks we scored 2940 in time spy, which clearly showed that the new CPU is vastly superior to the old one, with the CPU scoring 5150 and the graphics scoring 2734. So hey, at least DirectX 12 is supported by the multiple threads of the system and the great Tonga architecture powering the R9 285, meaning the system is future-proof even if I don't want to upgrade any of the parts. Following this up with Firestrike, which I think is DirectX 11 based, echoed a similar score of 7672 overall, with the GPU coming in at 8567 and the CPU coming in at virtually double with 14977. So I think we can see that the system is definitely ready to cope with the new GPU, if I ever find a Vega 56 at RRP that is. So from productivity to gaming, this PC is flawless, and well, not only is that thanks to the 12 threads of the Ryzen 5 1600, it's also down to the amazing AMD Radeon R9 285, which in case you want one after seeing these benchmarks sells as cheap as £85. Yep, that's right, £85 for a graphics card that was playing some games natively at 4K, also has AMD VC for 4K recording, so yeah, this thing is like an amazing card for the money, and I bought it for like £120 like years back, and it's just as good now as it was then. And that's why you've seen so many of these gorgeous recordings, because video encoding on Ryzen compared to the i3 is a world of difference. So these on-screen recordings were taken without any performance hit, and they look amazing. But really, that card is so good it deserves a video on its own. This video is more of a thank you to all of you who have supported the channel so far, which I know is something I say a lot, but I really do mean it. We have come a long way from using my crappy old phone as a camera to my very own DSLR. From 2 cores of an i3 to 6 Ryzen cores. We've gone from Movie Maker to Sony Vegas, and it's been a journey, and I can't wait to see what the rest of the year will bring. It's taken a lot of work, and I want to see what a whole lot more can do. I'd also like to give one last special thank you to all of those people over on Patreon who helped make all this possible, with their donations funding a lot of the parts I've been able to buy and helping by putting money towards a new camera and a microphone. And if you ever do want to help out, there are incentives like getting to vote on the next video, as well as a ranker in the Discord, which I'm also very active on. And you get the satisfaction of knowing you helped out the channel in a massive way. So thank you very much for watching again. Good night.